The sun blazed mercilessly over Cold Creek, turning the air into dust and light, the kind of heat that made even whispers feel heavy. A crowd had gathered in the main street, their boots grinding grit, their hats shading eyes hungry for spectacle. At the center stood a wooden platform, rough-hewn planks nailed together, and upon it a young woman bound with coarse rope. Her name was Clara. She was 25 years old, a widow, once admired for beauty that softened hard faces, now diminished by hunger and shame. Her dress hung faded and dust-stained, the hem frayed by travel and tears. Yet she held herself upright, chin lifted, though her wrists burned against the ropes. The sheriff's voice rang out flat and practiced, as if selling a horse. Widow. Strong, quiet. No children. That last phrase made the crowd murmur with knowing smirks. Everyone understood why she was there. She had been discarded, cast aside by a husband who wanted heirs in a town that saw barren women as burdens. No one asked if her heart ached, if her nights were filled with prayers unanswered. To them, she was simply what she could not give. Coins clinked in the hands of bidders, men leaning on posts, spitting tobacco, whispering crude jokes. Clara felt each word scrape her skin like a whip. She stared past them, into the horizon, refusing to let tears fall. She would not give them the satisfaction. From the back of the crowd, a figure stepped forward, tall, steady, carrying the kind of silence that drew eyes without effort. Ethan Carrion, rancher of Twin Ridge, stood with his infant daughter cradled against his arm. His clothes were plain, his boots coated in dust, his face marked with the quiet dignity of labor. Unlike the others, he said nothing, only walked straight to the platform and held out his hand, palm open, silver coins glinting. The sheriff hesitated, confused. Why would a man with a child already want a barren widow? But Ethan's gaze held no hesitation. The coins were taken, the ropes loosened, and Clara stumbled forward into the light. Ethan caught her before she fell. His touch was firm but careful, like one handling something fragile yet unbroken. Clara lifted her eyes, expecting pity, mockery, perhaps even hunger. What she found instead startled her: respect. A gaze that did not measure her worth by what she could bear, but by what she already was. He said nothing, just adjusted the baby in his arms and guided her down from the platform. They rode out of town together, the crowd's silence following them. Clara did not ask where they were going. She did not have the strength for questions. The road stretched across the plains, golden grass bending in the wind, the sun sinking red behind distant hills. The baby whimpered, and Clara, without thinking, reached out. Ethan handed the child over without a word, and Clara pressed the small bundle against her chest, rocking gently. Something inside her, hollow for so long, stirred faintly, like the faint flicker of a long-dead flame. The ranch at Twin Ridge appeared rugged against the horizon, fences broken in places, the house weather-beaten but standing. Clara dismounted awkwardly and used a kindness, expecting orders, perhaps even rejection. Ethan simply said, "There's supper inside. Take what you need." Then he took the baby from her arms and walked toward the porch. No demands, no conditions. For the first time in years, Clara felt something dangerous and unfamiliar: dignity. Days turned into weeks. Clara worked hard, her hands blistered from scrubbing, her back aching from hauling water, her dress perpetually streaked with dust. She heard the whispers carried on the wind when neighbors passed by. "That's the barren one Carrion brought home. Shame he couldn't find better." She bore them silently, though each word pressed in her ribs like a blade. Ethan never repeated them. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. He would ask, "You eaten yet?" or "A fence line needs fixing." Simple, unadorned, but never unkind. At night, Clara lay awake in the spare room, listening to coyotes calling from the hills, the baby crying softly in the next room. She would tiptoe to the crib, soothe Kelly with gentle hums until the child slept again. The first time Ethan found her there, he didn't speak, didn't question. He just stood in the doorway, watching silently, a look in his eyes that Clara could not name. One afternoon by the creek, while she bent over the wash, a rattlesnake slid from the reeds, its rattle shaking like a warning drum. Clara froze. Then, with desperate courage, she seized a stone and brought it down with all her strength. The snake's body twisted and stilled. Her breath came ragged, but she remained upright. Ethan appeared moments later, rifle in hand, scanning the ground. His eyes flicked to the dead snake, then to her trembling hands. He didn't praise her. Instead, he gently turned her wrists, checking for bites, his touch steady, his silence louder than any words of admiration could have been. Later, as the sky deepened violet, he sat on the porch, speaking of his late wife. Fever took her. Kelly, barely a week old. Thought grief would hollow me out. Turns out it just made me heavier. His voice carried sorrow, but no bitterness. Clara listened, her own heart echoing with old wounds. Memories of a husband who had called her useless. The faces of townsfolk who had looked away. She said nothing, yet he seemed to hear her silence as clearly as words. That night, she noticed his bedroom door left open, not wide, just ajar, as though trust itself had been laid bare. She did not enter, but the gesture lingered in her chest like a small flame. At church the next Sunday, whispers grew sharper. Women eyed Clara with pity and scorn. A ranch hand named Jeb Carter sneered as Ethan passed. "What good's a wife who can't carry a line?" His words cut deep, meant to wound both man and woman. Ethan did not strike back. He did not need to. He placed his hand gently at the small of Clara's back, guiding her forward, a gesture that spoke louder than fists. She belonged beside him. That night, Clara wept alone, but when Kelly cried, she gathered the child in her arms, humming a lullaby cracked and fragile. The baby's small fingers brushed her cheek, and for the first time, Clara felt not empty, but full of love that had nothing to do with blood. Then came the night of fire and hooves. Rustlers swept down under cover of darkness, rifles flashing, torches flaring against the black sky. Clara was alone with Kelly when the first shots tore through the silence. Fear clenched her chest, but instinct burned brighter. She hid the baby in a grain bin, whispering prayers, then seized Ethan's rifle from above the hearth. Outside, the barn roared with light. Men shouted, cattle bellowed. A figure lunged from the shadows, and Clara fired. The recoil nearly tore her shoulder, but the rustler fell. Her heart hammered, yet her stance held. Ethan rode in from the far pasture, horse foaming, pistol blazing. He saw Clara in the chaos, hair wild, eyes fierce, rifle braced against her shoulder. For a breathless moment, time itself seemed to halt. She was no longer the widow cast aside, no longer barren or broken. She was fire. She was shield. She was the soul of his home. Together they fought, driving the rustlers back into the dark. One man caught Clara's arm, wrenching her down, but she clawed and bit until Ethan's hand tore him away. They stood together, bodies trembling, lungs heaving, until the night was theirs again. In the aftermath, smoke still rising, Ethan turned to her, voice low but fierce. "You're not leaving here. Ever." It was not a plea, not even a promise. It was truth spoken into being. Clara's tears cut streaks through the dust on her face. For the first time, she believed she belonged. The days after carried whispers once more, but their tone had changed. Townsfolk spoke of the widow who fought off rustlers, of the rancher who trusted her with his life and his child. Clara walked through Cold Creek with her head high, Kelly in her arms, Ethan at her side. Where once there had been pity and scorn, now there was respect. At the ranch, laughter, small, cautious at first, returned to her lips. She braided Kelly's hair, sang her songs, tended the land with a devotion deeper than duty. Ethan watched from the porch some evenings, quiet smile hidden beneath his hat brim, a man who had found more than he had dared to hope. One evening, as the sky turned gold and lavender, Ethan took her hand in his. "You've given more life to this ranch than I ever dreamed," he said. Clara's heart steadied, her soul no longer hollow. She knew then she was not barren, not broken. She was mother, partner, and heart of Twin Ridge. And so, dear listener, remember this. Worth is not measured by what the world demands of you, nor by what it says you lack. Sometimes the truest family is not born, but chosen. Sometimes the deepest love is not spoken, but shown in quiet hands and steadfast hearts. And perhaps the lesson is this. When you believe yourself unwanted, it may be only because the place that truly needs you has not yet opened its door.